Hi, and welcome to the Community Advocate podcast. Today we're catching up with Dane Cross, Chief Operating Officer for not-for-profit Sporting Wheelies, an organisation dedicated to helping Australians with disability lead a more healthy and active life. Welcome, Dane.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thanks for joining. First of all, tell us a little bit about Sporting Wheelies. What's the origin of the organisation? And just give us a little bit of the elevator pitch as to what Sporting Wheelies is.
Yeah, Sporting Wheelies was founded 45 years ago as a result of people with disability, primarily wheelchair users at the start, who just basically wanted a sporting outlet. They identified a need for that adaptive sports space. The Paralympic Games have probably only recently kicked off as a thing. And within Queensland, we had wheelchair users looking to get involved, get better at sport, and possibly create a pathway towards that gold medal at the Paralympic Games. So that's the foundations of the organisation. But since then, we've, as any organisation, we've gone through ebbs and flows, and to where we are today, we offer a variety of adaptive sports for people with disability, but also we offer our allied health services, which provide that rehabilitation aspects, and the connection between rehabilitation and sport is one that we've really identified as a strength of our organisation, providing people with not only those health and wellbeing aspects of their rehab, but then the social and connectedness that comes along with participating in sport.
And which leads us to, it's Christmas time, like it's a busy time of the year, and we normally get a bit excited about getting into the festive season, but it can be pretty manic and stressful at the best of times. Why is it particularly challenging? Why can it be particularly challenging for people with disability? What are some of the barriers that they face?
Yeah, you're right. And for many of us, Christmas is a time of joy. It's about connection. It's about celebration. But, for the 20-odd% or 18% of Australians living with disability, there are barriers. There are barriers within society that prevent that full access to community and therefore full access to that social interaction and connection at this time of year. We see things like Christmas parties being held in inaccessible venues, and so staff with disabilities have been excluded. It's more than just physical access barriers. The overwhelming crowds, lack of inclusive spaces, they all contribute to the feelings of isolation. And when I say that, it's more along the lines of where there's barriers. And when the barriers are so great that you choose to stay at home as opposed to going and attending an event or facing those barriers, it's a sad reflection on society that if you choose isolation over taking on barriers, there's something that needs to be done.
And this is clearly something that many people are doing, for a fact, and through research and anecdotally that, the people choosing not to go because it's too hard and they feel that way.
100%. And, having disability comes with its own challenges. Just to get out the door, it can take someone like myself, for example, a 3-hour process to get up in the morning, go to the toilet, have a shower, get out and get dressed and get out the door. And by the time I've gotten out the door, I've already done half a day's work. Perfect. And so once you therefore then are faced with barriers in the community, it just sometimes just gets a bit too hard, and you choose the easy option, choose the easy route, and just stay at home.
And you've done that yourself. Tell us a little bit about your situation for disability.
Yeah, I have a spinal cord injury, which 23 years ago now, playing touch football and resulted in a C5 quadriplegia. And, since then I've been a full-time wheelchair user. I myself, I like to keep a positive attitude, and I've moved on. I've got a full-time job. a wife, 3 kids, and a mortgage, just like every other bloke in Australia. But
a bit on your plate, yeah.
Yeah, there's a fair bit going on, and I live a full life. However, there are instances where I've had friends or occasions, even I remember one just recently where my son's sports team were having an end of season get together where the parents were invited along, but it was in a venue that was upstairs on mezzanine level, and basically they said, well, this is the venue we've chosen, and unless you can get up those stairs, you miss out, which was really disheartening. It's it's a reflection on the acceptance of the other parents within the team and the coach, but also of the venue itself, and not that it wasn't designed in a way that was universally accessible.
And just to answer my next question, partly I was going to say, do you think, with like organisations, if it's a Christmas party or a function like that, if it's a business, are they just not thinking about accessibility, or in some cases they're just deciding bad luck? And clearly, as you just said, in some cases it's just, we're sort of catering to the majority. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But there would be a bit of, sometimes people aren't, even today, just aren't giving enough thought to that when they're planning things like this for access issues.
There's a couple of words for that. Ableism is one of them that comes to mind. The other one is unconscious bias. But people just aren't thinking of it. It's not at the forefront of everyone's mind. And for those that don't live it or experience it on the daily, in the past, I'd probably say you can be excused, but there's a lot more socially minded people out there these days, and rightly so. It needs to be inclusion and accessibility. This needs to become mainstream.
Why is it so important during the whole, as you pointed out, and other guys, is it's important all year round, but why is addressing these things so important during the holidays? I mean, you touched on and talked about it, that it is the time of year that it is, but is it because it's exacerbating these issues for people? Like, during other times of the year, will they?
Yeah, it is. There's that element where there are more events on, there are more people wanting to get together, wanting to celebrate the end of year or the festive season. But there's also the other element that comes into play. It's that it's a busy time of year, and customer service staff get flustered and don't have the additional time of day to allow the appropriate accommodations that may be required by someone visiting their venue. And so the customer service goes out the window, and they don't have the patience, the time, or the insight into that person's requirements, whatever they may be, and therefore it really burdens, or it feels like, to the person with disability attending there, it feels like they are a burden to that venue.
What are some of the ways that Sporting Wheelies are trying to alleviate these issues, like social isolation, accessibility? Like, what are some of the things that your organisation are doing or hope to do?
Our work puts us in direct contact with these individuals who face social isolation daily, and we're through sport as a tool. But I call it a tool because it's a soft entry point that opens the doors for people to come in and feel a sense of community, and feel a sense of belonging to a group that they can relate to, their peers. They might find their tribe, and so through sport, through team sport, through individual sport, through the inclusive programs that we offer, such as our schools program, our para squad program for young people, it brings people in and connects them to a community space that's accessible, welcoming, and inclusive.
How many people do you have involved? Like, is there an overall number, or sort of ebbs and flows a bit, I imagine, but how many people are you helping, do you think, or to do that?
So yes, it does ebb and flow, and we've gone through periods of time where we've had 10,000 plus members who across the state of Queensland, participating in sports of all kinds. Since then, due to funding and levels of participation and competing interests, the participation for people with disability in our sport specifically has declined, and we're looking to turn that around. And part of what we're asking for this Christmas is for people to help us achieve that.
Because it's like being a not-for-profit, these things don't run themselves, do they? Like, anything that provides any kind of service or frontline, service needs support.
There is a common misconception that the NDIS is all things to all people with disability, whereas, it's exactly that. It's a misconception. The fact that trying to get your hands on an adaptive piece of sports equipment, for example, a sports wheelchair, costs $7,000. That's out of reach for the regular Joe Blow who just wants to have a crack at wheelchair basketball. Whereas if you you apply then to the NDIS for it, and if you haven't been playing the sport and you've got a significant sort of interest and level of ability in that sport, you basically doesn't get funded, gets knocked back. So the organisations like Sporting Wheelies, we provide that equipment, we provide that extra support for people to come in and just participate in the sport that they love.
What can businesses do to, particularly around access, and you've touched on some of this, but around accessibility and including everyone? Are there simple things that employers can do to help alleviate some of these things? I mean, obviously some structural things are, that's another category, I imagine, depending on when it comes to access. But are there simple things that can be done if they think about it?
Yeah, when I talk to this point, I usually talk to the fact that there are two elements to access and inclusion, and that's those two words: accessibility and inclusion. Accessibility to me is what we talk about, the physical environment, the physical access to a premises. Inclusion, however, it's a welcoming attitude. It's an attitude of, if you're willing to come here and give this a go, we're willing to help make that happen. And a lot of that inclusive and welcoming attitude can overcome those physical access barriers. If you're willing to give that assistance, you can you can start anywhere with what you've got as a facility or a venue or a business. And to that extent, disability itself is so wide and varied, in the sense that what's a barrier for one person with disability is not necessarily a barrier for another. So if you I use an example, a person with hearing impairment who can walk into a venue and navigate stairs isn't blocked by the fact that there's steps at the front door to that venue, whereas a wheelchair user on the flip side is. And so what I like to say to businesses looking to become more accessible, to become more inclusive, it's about making progress over perfection. You can't be all things to all people overnight. But what you can do is start to make progress. And that's done by, firstly, adopting an inclusive attitude. Secondly, making an assessment of your premises and your policies and your practices, and what can you chip away at now to open the doors or open your doors to more people. And even if that's one person, by going out and let me think of a cheap example. Printing a large print menu for someone with vision impairment. That's cheap as shit. So what the cost of 10-cent photocopy. That's one step that is at low cost to a business, but would make the world of difference for an individual attending that business.
Yeah, it's a great example. As you just said, though, that's a great example of, quite often it's just but it's the thought process is as important as anything else, isn't it? To think, what can I do? And then picking examples like that, and which ladder up to things that will cost quite a bit, but are still worthy to do. But there are simpler things that can be done that also make a big difference.
And I guess the other element to that is the provision of information is essential to enabling someone with disability or empowering someone with disability to make a decision about whether a venue is accessible to them or not. So if I know before I go to a venue that there's a step at a front door, and I'll use a simple analogy, the step at the front door, as a wheelchair user, if I know that there's a step there and I really need to get into that restaurant, or I really want to get into that restaurant, that's where my Christmas party is being held, or that's where my next family dinner is being held, I can come prepared and I can bring my own portable ramp. And therefore, I can still get in. I can still participate. I don't turn around at the front door and get led away because I can't get in. I know in advance. I can make the decision. I can make a conscious decision to come prepared, or to decide that that's not for me. I'll pass this one up.
Yeah. And has that happened a lot to you over the years? I imagine. It's a bit of trial and error with this kind of thing.
Well, that's right, and you do tend to gravitate back to those venues and businesses that are accessible and inclusive. But when you do go to a new venue, I mentioned it earlier, it could take 3 hours for me to get up and ready to get out the door, and then to drive however long I've travelled to get to that venue, and then to get to the front door and realise that there's a step here, I can't actually be here. And then to turn on, that is when the disappointment, the anger, the resentment, the complaints arise. But if I knew in advance, I could have made that choice.
Mate, thanks for your time. A pleasure to speak to you. And hopefully, things have got better over the years and will continue to get better in this regard. But what I found with all these things, it's a constant kind of fight, isn't it? It's you can't take the foot off in terms of trying to get some of the wins on the board that you've talked about. So hopefully, things will continue to improve. It won't happen overnight, but
yeah, absolutely. What we're trying to achieve through our Christmas appeal is specifically within our facilities, we want to have a space where people can socially interact. They want to connect, to belong. And I mentioned that we do this through our sports. However, once that sport's over, or once they've done their gym session, or once they've attended their exercise physiology session, people want to hang around, people want to interact, people want to have a coffee and chat to their peers. And what we're hoping to do with the funds raised is to establish more of those spaces and create more of those opportunities that, at the end of the day, reduce social isolation.
Thanks, Dane. All the best for Sporting Wheelies' continuing efforts to improve the lives of Australians with disability. Join us again next time on the Community Advocate podcast.